Okay, I'm going to do a demo of the newest version of my sequencer. Try to make it as fast as possible, but there's a lot of features, so it'll be interesting to see how long this video ends up. So basically what I have here is the latest PCB board. It's basically a fully self-contained Arduino shield, effectively. So you can see the Arduino Do is actually plugged in on the other side of the board right here, with its power and USB and everything kind of pointing out the back, so you can conveniently plug it in. Also on the back of the board is 4 USB ports, 2 in, 2 out. There's an SD memory card right here in the back. And then back here there is a piezo buzzer that's used for the internal metronome. On the front here, I've also in this version added a clock in, external clock in, which supports 24 pulses per quarter note, 16th notes or 8th notes in, and it'll sync up to whatever external clock you have there. There's a clock output, which right now just outputs 16th notes, but it'll in the future be adjustable. And then there's 3 trigger routes that are mapped to 3 of the drum tracks, and we'll get to those. As far as the controls themselves, there's a 16:2 display that shows tempo and then other settings. There's an encoder knob that allows you to make those settings. For the most part, I try to minimize the number of settings, or settings are left to very global things that are concern your setup rather than your project itself. There's a 7-segment display. The first half shows the length, the current bar that you're on, and the length of the bank, number of bars for the bank that you're on. And then it also shows the current track, either MIDI note track or drum track that you're on. We've got 4 bank buttons, which are also used for other things. We'll see that. We've got a couple buttons for triggering drums here. I've got 8 control buttons, which gives you most of your functionality, transport, and a shift button. Again, on this PCB version of the PC, all the electronics are integrated in the board. So over here you've got your MIDI electronics. Over here you've got your buffering for the triggers in and out for protection. And the Arduino, again, plugs right onto the back of the board. So as far as features go, this sequencer is primarily set up to be a 256 step 4 banks. So that's a total of 1,024 steps. Over 8 MIDI tracks. And then there's also a drum sequencer that has 16 tracks, right? The way it turns on immediately is there's the 8 note tracks and there's 8 drum tracks. But if I hit a shift and this little arrow button, get this kind of sliding effect. You can kind of think of it as the 8 note tracks kind of slid off to the left here, and now you've got your 16 drum tracks accessible there, and we'll talk more about that. So we'll slide back. The number of steps is, like I said, 256 for drums. It kind of by default is 256 for notes, but there is a way to turn off the quantization of that and make it actually 30-second notes. So technically you could have 512 steps per bank of 30-second notes. The way that this stores events on the note side is as a big event log. So it's not like filling little buckets for each step. It's just a big list of events. Events are basically MIDI note on, MIDI note off, but it can also store events for program change, CC messages, pitch wheel, tempo change. What else am I missing? Patch change. That's the other one. And then I'm also thinking of doing some other things, like being able to store mute and solo states in the sequence itself, so you can easily swap that. So yeah, so these 16 buttons here help you select the tracks. Each track can be assigned to multiple MIDI ports. So this button here, this control button here, is the MIDI select button. If I press that, I should explain also, basically what I've got is coming in, I've got a master controller coming in on MIDI channel 1, and then I've got all my MIDI coming out of this one port, going to a MIDI splitter to all my devices across 16 channels. So yeah, again, if I press the MIDI button, it's MIDI channel 1. This track is assigned to MIDI channel 2. This track 3 is assigned to MIDI channel 6. Track 4 is a track to MIDI channel 8. And so on. If I want to track to the second bank, that's where these come in. So if I wanted to, instead of sending this out of MIDI port A, MIDI channel 8, I could press this button and do that. Now it's going to send it on both MIDI channels on there. Or I can toggle that one off. So now it's basically track 4 is going to go out of port B channel 8. I'm going to put that back the way it was. Okay, on the drums, you can do the same thing. So here, the drum track is set to MIDI channel 11, which is where my drum machine is. There's a setting here that by default, if I go to any drum track and I change the MIDI, all the MIDI drum tracks change. And the idea there is if you only have one drum machine, you don't want to constantly be changing those. But you can go into settings and you can change that where each drum track does actually have its own individual MIDI channel out. And we'll get more into that. But I'm going to go ahead and put that back there because here's my drums. So these buttons here, this one on the right here is basically a single drum trigger. And then this one here is a fill. You actually have to be playing. So let's get the clock going so you can see we're going there. And now, and that's recordable. Okay, so you got 4 banks. So 256 steps across 4 banks of 256 steps. So total of 1,024 steps there. And we'll get more into that. So let's jump right into a quick getting things started real quick. So I'm going to put in a drum pattern. I have right now the setting turned on that whenever I record, the internal metronome will go off. So hopefully you'll be able to hear that. And we'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to turn on recording, arm recording, and we'll play. And right now I'm set up for a 2-bar pattern on bank 1. So it's just going through the 2 bars. And let's put in a drum beat. Okay, great example. So I was a little off there. I'm going to turn off record. So, okay. Great time to show this feature. So if I do shift and this button here, step, we'll get more into that. But if I do shift step, I'm now into step edit. And basically what this does is it shows me that I'm currently on on bar 1 of a 2-bar pattern. And you can see that this is my kick drum track. I was trying to do 4 on the floor and I actually missed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit step and I'm going to hit this one that is off. And I have these flashing lights which are telling me that I can do something with that. If I do the left one, it's going to nudge it to the left. If I do a right one, it's going to nudge it 1 step to the right. If I'll show these in a second. So let's nudge that to the right. So now that kick is now lined up on the downbeat. Okay, I'm going to turn my knob here, which is going to take me to the next bar. And here we actually see, okay, so I actually got those right, but then this one was supposed to be the first beat of the other one. So there's a couple ways I can do this. I can nudge it to the right and it will wrap around and fix it there. Or I can do one of these other options. So I'm going to go shift and pick that one. And now I could nudge it to the left. I could nudge it to the right. This is basically toggling the hit. So there I turned it off. Okay, if I do it again, there I turned it on. This second one is accent. So if I do that, now I've got 2 lights lit up. That basically means that that hit is accented. You know what, let's actually keep that for an interesting pattern. I'm going to turn the knob one more time. It's going to loop around, come back to bar 1. I still want to add this hit. So I'm going to do shift, select that step, and add the hit. So now I should have a... Okay, and you'll see that as it's playing, it's actually shifting the bars and showing me what's going on. If I wanted to at this point, I could either exit step edit by doing shift step edit, and then we can go add the snare. If I want to use step edit as a way to enter notes, I could. So I just select the snare. Nothing's lit up, but we want the snare on the 2 and the 4. So I'm going to do that, and we'll make those 2 and 4 hits accents. Okay, so all right. And I can show you the fills. So we're going to exit step edit. I'm now going to the hi-hat, and we're going to turn on record. You can still hear the metronome going. Okay. I'm going through a compressor here on the drum so you can hear a little bit of ducking going on there. Let's do this though. I think the hi-hat is actually a little bit too loud. So what I can do is going back to MIDI, the MIDI button here. If I do, I'm sorry, it's not on the MIDI button, it's on the yellow button. In development, things have been moving around a lot, so I need to remember where they are. Okay, so I have this feature here called drum velocity, which is on the yellow row, no shift. So if I just hit that and hit drum velocity, what this is doing now is for this channel, which is the hi-hat channel, you can't see it here, but it basically says velocity map, and then the current value is 70. I can turn the knob to basically adjust the note velocity value for that hit. 70 seem to be a bit loud, so let's turn it down to 60. You'll see these numbers are changing here because there's also a way I could either do it with a knob to get an exact value, or I can use the buttons to get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So we'll do 60. Okay, and then I'm going to hit the knob, press the knob button, and that's kind of like a back button. But the setting has been saved. I can also do the same thing doing yellow and drum accent, and then it says accent map, and that's 80. So basically, that's the velocity value for one of those accent hits. I won't change that right now, but if I now do play, let's actually do this real time. So we're on the hi-hat track. I'm going to go to velocity map, and we're going to turn it down. And you can hear the velocity coming down. So there's 30 right there. So there's 40, 50, 60. So let's leave it at 40 for this. Okay, hit OK. So now, anytime I do a normal hi-hat hit, it's going to be a velocity of 40. I can also then save the drum maps. So there's a save D map here on the yellow line. If I hit yellow, save D map. So now it says save drum map, select slot. So basically I have 16 slots that I can set in drum maps. So what I've been doing is using different slots for my different drum machines. So when I start a project, I can just basically pick a drum map. Or I could use slots for different drum patches, whatever works. So I can now save this into a slot. I've been saving this drum machine into slot 5. The difference between the red and the green means it's an empty slot. Red means that it's been saved before. I know that I've saved this into 5, and I'm going to put it back into 5. Okay, so now I can then recall that, and the way you recall that is you do a shift MIDI button, and then that shows you with the red lights which ones have saved ones, and if I press 5 it'll basically just load that back. I can also set one as my default drum map, so if I do yellow set as default, that basically makes that the drum map that comes up when you start a new project. So since I usually start with this drum machine, that's usually my default. Okay, so I've got other things here, like I showed before. I can slide over, and so let's just show that. So right now I'm on drum track 8, If I slide over, you'll see that the way that it indicates the slide is this yellow row inverses. So now drum track 8 is not lit, which means that's the selected one. Now I go to 9, 10, 11, 12. This is where the last 3 drum tracks, so 14, 15, and 16, you probably can't see it, but there's a T here that indicates triggers, and that's trigger 1, 2, and 3. So if I pick 14 and hit that, that's hitting, actually that's going into a Moog DFAM, and it's advancing the click. So actually if I do this, so that's basically doing every 16th note out is the way I currently have it set up. Or that's what the fill button does. So it's just stepping through the drummer from another mother sequence. Number 2, let's see, where's that going? That's going to a Eurorack drum module I have. That's going through some effects. And then output 3, where's that going? That is going to a Eurorack envelope generator for a noisemaker thing. That basically triggers an envelope on that. Okay, so I can basically treat these as basically they're just drum triggers, and I can add them to my sequence. So actually, let's do that. Let's go back to the drummer from another mother, and we'll go ahead and add that in. And we'll add this in. Like that. Okay, so I'm gonna turn down that one hit. Actually, let's do this. You know what? I didn't like that hit on, which one is it? That one right there on track 15. So let's do this. Let's go to clear track. That's on the yellow button, and it's under shift. So shift yellow, clear track. You can't probably see it, but it says clear track with a question mark, and then there's yes and no. Whenever you see these two green and red buttons flashing, it's basically a warning or a confirmation dialog. You can think of it that way. There is a setting to turn those off if you decide that you want to live on the edge and not have to confirm everything. You can turn those off. But I'm going to hit the green for yes. It says track cleared, and now that's gone. Okay, so we got some drum track going. I'm going to slide back to the other way so we have our note tracks here. Let's see what I got. Okay, so I got kind of a bass that going on there on channel 6, track 6. So let's do this. I'm going to turn on the arpeggiator. So blue button here is basically what I call the robot button. There's 4 types of robots right now. I have plans to add some more. They are basically selected up here. The first one is an arpeggiator. The second one is a Turing machine. The third one is a chord memory player. And the fourth one is a random pattern picker. And hopefully we can get through those. So let's see. I'm going to hold down the robot button here and turn on the arpeggiator. So now you see this is flashing here, which basically means a robot is turned on. Right now you can only have one robot turned on at a time, but the robot output is recordable. So you can basically record what the robot's doing and then move to a different robot. So if I hold this button down, this button flashes, this bank flashes, which basically means the current robot that is on is the arpeggiator. This red flash here basically means it's going to be applied to track 6 because that's where we turned it on. And then these yellow lights basically are showing current status in the blue row here because the robots are blue. So it says here up, which basically means the arpeggiator is going to arpeggiate up, and it's going to arpeggiate 16th notes. If I do a shift blue, that's the second row of status, and it basically means the second row here says it's going to arpeggiate over an octave, and it's going to be staccato. Just to run through the different settings right here. So on the arpeggiator, you can latch it as far as direction, up, down, include and exclude the end, repeating the end. Random weighted, which basically for the arpeggiator uses the bottom note of the chord that you're playing as kind of the root, and so it'll play that more often than the other notes. Double note, basically instead of doing single notes over the arpeggiation, it'll double each note. So let's actually turn that on. As note length could be half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. Rhythm 13, which I'll talk about in a second. And then rhythm off, which for the arpeggiator doesn't really mean anything. That's actually for the Chord computer. And then I have 2 empty slots, which I had to figure out what that will be later on. Rhythm 13 is basically what I can do there is I can go to drum track 13, which is conveniently located at the rhythm 13 button, and whatever pattern I put in there will be used as the rhythm pattern for the arpeggiator. So actually, let's do this. There's actually nothing mapped to there right now. So actually, let's fix that real quick, and let's talk about how I do that. So for the drum tracks, you can instantly map a MIDI note to each one. So I'm on a drum note here. I'm playing on my keyboard, and basically on my keyboard, I can send different MIDI notes to different things. And so what I can do is basically I can press while I'm in this mode of having a track. If I hold down the MIDI button, it's going to tell me what MIDI channel I'm on, but I can also pick a note. So I'm going to pick the cowbell there, let that go. So now that note value, in this case the cowbell note, is mapped to channel 13. So, and that's part of actually the drum map that we saved earlier. You can actually save all that stuff, store it, use it as your default, that kind of thing. So, okay, now MIDI track number 13 is mapped to the cowbell. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to record a quick rhythm pattern with that, because then we'll show off the rhythm 13. So okay, so now let's do this. We're going to keep that there because we want to be able to hear it and make sure it syncs up, but we don't really want it quite as loud. So we're going to do drum velocity, and we're going to drop it down to, so you can just barely hear it. Okay, it's at velocity of 20. Okay, now we're going to go back to our tracks. And let's see, we were on MIDI track 6 is where we had the arpeggiator. The one thing, the fact that the arpeggiator is on now, when I play a note on the keyboard, nothing happens because it wants to arpeggiate. But it only will arpeggiate when we are playing. So if I do an arpeggiator now. So now we're arpeggiating, and let's see, we're doing a down, we're doing up. So let's do down. As you would expect, random over 2 octaves. Okay, now you can hear it a bit better. All right, so let's see, legato. And then back to staccato. Okay, now I want to show off the rhythm 13 because this is really cool. So right now we are set at 16th notes. If I change over to rhythm 13, so listen to the cowbell. So it's basically whatever rhythm pattern is on drum track 13, that will be used to drive the arpeggiator. So that's kind of cool. And then actually, if we want to do this, this could be fun. Oh, we're actually doing double notes. Let's turn double notes off. Okay. There's single notes. There's double notes. And let's do... There, you can hear the double notes pretty clearly. Okay. So that's the arpeggiator. The next robot is Turing machine. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to turn off the arpeggiator. And now, actually, this is a pretty good patch for that. So I'm going to go turn on the Turing machine. So with the Turing machine, it's kind of like an arpeggiator. It plays random patterns or random, actually, melodies with different complexities. So for the Turing pattern, if we turn that on, we'll see that we are using it on track 6 or on Turing. Turing latches, which basically means you play one note and then it'll just keep playing that note. And in the Turing case, that one note is actually a root note that is the basis for the scale that you're going to be playing. We're going to be doing up-down pattern excluding. Let's start with that, but then we'll move to random. We're going to be playing eighth notes. And then if we do shift blue for the bottom row, we're going to be playing 2 octaves. Actually, let's move that to an octave for now. We're going to be playing staccato. And then over here, you've got a bunch of different options. So for a Turing, it basically plays a bunch of random notes or random melody across a fixed pattern length. So you can pick pattern length here, which is shift blue pattern length, and it's going to play an 8-bar random melody, and then it will repeat that melody if you have the right settings. And so I'm going to actually change that to 4 bars. So let's save that. So now if I go back there, 4 bars, and then I'm going to pick a scale. And let's see. Let's just pick a minor pentatonic scale. But you have a bunch of scales here. I have, and their modes also. I could put more in there. It's right now limited to about 10. But I plan to put more in. So we've got a scale, and then the other thing you do with 2 options for the Turing machine is probability. So this is basically going to be the probability that it's going to replace a note in that pattern. So actually I'm going to start with 100. This has a similar UI to the velocity map where you can turn the knob and it'll change value from 0 to 100%, but you can also use the buttons. If you use the buttons, it's kind of a one-click thing, so I just hit the 70 button and it just went ahead and saved that because the buttons are meant to be a shortcut. So actually, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to probability, and I actually want to do 100%. So 10, you see the numbers here, 1 through 10, so that's 10%, 20, 30, 40, up to 100%. 11 has a little not sign. You probably can't see it. That's basically 11 is 0 in this particular case, or 0%, which means it will not change. The other parameter on a Turing machine is complexity, so let's pick that. The complexity is basically what is the probability that the note is going to be an actual correct note length, if you remember we were set at eighth notes, or it could be a tied note, which means it's going to end up playing a longer note, or it could be a rest. So I'm going to put that leave that at 40% because that's usually a pretty interesting range to get some neat melodies going. So we've got the Turing machine set up. Like the arpeggiator, you have to be playing for it to really do anything, but I'm going to pick a root note. I'm going to hit an A. Okay, so this is a Turing machine playing a random pattern. Let's do this. Let's go to complexity, and I'm going to make that 100. Okay, and now it's playing an eighth note, because 100% basically plays the actual note value. And I'm going to change that to 16th notes. Okay. So now it's playing 16th notes. Let's change the complexity back down again. So now we're at a complexity of 60%. So now you get this combination of 60% of the time it'll play the note, and then the way it actually works is 60% of the time it will play the note as designed. So in this case, 16th notes. But the other 20% it'll play a rest, 20% it'll play a tie. Okay, and let's see, we'll make that go over 2 octaves. A bit too much for that pattern. Let's do 1 octave. Or actually, technically it's 2 octaves. It's the octave plus 1. So this is over 2 octaves. And let's see, we are playing random notes. So with Turing, random weighted is kind of nice. I played an A. So now it's going to be, our scale was the minor pentatonic. So it's basically playing a A minor pentatonic with mainly playing an A most of the time, not most of the time, but weighted to play the A more often. And this is great because it helps establish the root note. But you can also do kind of an up-down thing. And there you just get a little bit more random. Here I just did up. So now everything is up. And then getting back to the idea of the Turing machine. So we're doing a 4-bar pattern. So what it's doing is it's picking a note and filling this 4-bar pattern. But because probability is 100, it's changing the note every time. If we drop this down, so I set probability to 20%. So what this means is it'll repeat that pattern now over and over again that it just filled. And then 20% of the time it'll change a note. So if we go back to probability and actually set it to 0, now it'll never change. So if we listen for a second. It's going to keep repeating that pattern, but then if we bump up the probability to 30%, it'll slowly morph that pattern over time. So this is a great way to put in like counter melodies. You basically write your song, your melody, it's in a certain scale. You can then basically choose that scale and then create a counter melody on the top line or something like that. I do that all the time. So that's the Turing machine. The next one is the chord computer. So I'm going to turn off the Turing machine. We're actually going to switch over to a piano so we can play some chords. And I'm going to turn on the chord computer. So here we basically have, if I do Shift, Robot, Chord, I can pick a chord. And so here's like a sus4. And here's a dominant 7th, major 7th. So you can't see here, but I'm only playing single notes. So C, G, F. So we can record that. Quantize did for me a bit. So actually, let's do this over here. So you probably heard that it quantized and didn't quite have the groove right. So I'm going to do a Shift Yellow, clear track. Yes. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch the quantize record mode. So that is actually a setting. So if I hold down the knob button, that shows me some setting values. Quantize record is on the 12th one, so I'm going to turn that on. Okay, so now, if I do that same recording, it will now quantize to 32nd notes, which might make the groove a little bit better. So still a little off, but getting there. I think part of the problem is this note here. I'm gonna shift that with the step edit and see what happens. Okay. This one is off too. There we go. Okay. One thing on the step edit and quantize record. So right now, again, we are in 30-second note quantization recording. I'm actually going to turn that off. When I did the step edit only allows you to edit 16th note resolution. So you actually don't get to edit those 30-second notes. Usually if you're using the 30-second note resolution, it's for like a lead line or something like that you probably just end up re-recording anyways. Okay, so patch change. So, yeah. I'm not super thrilled with that piano patch. It's a bit too reverby. So I'm going to do a patch change. And so the way you do a patch change is you basically do Shift and the MIDI button. And then when you get up here, it says select patch, and you can either turn the knob and go through all the patches, or you can use the buttons to select the patch. One thing I should point out on patch change is the original MIDI spec for patch changes allowed you to select a value from 0 to 128. And then they added the ability with the CC message to expand that to some ridiculous thousands numbers of patches. But I don't actually support that right now. I only support the initial 0 to 127 value, which gives you 128 patches. If you're going to use the keys, basically the way that works is when you are in the select patch UI, you see this is blinking up here. What this is basically saying is that these buttons reflect the first 16 patches. If I select the next one, then I've got the next 16 patches, and the UI changes over here to show you are selecting 17 through 32, 33 through 48, 49 through 64. If I do a shift in one of these buttons, then it brings me up to the next level, 65 through 80, 81 through 96, 97 through 112, 113 to 128. So if you know what patch you're going for, you can use the keyboard buttons, the select buttons as a quick shortcut, or again, you can just turn the knob. So 13 is pretty good. Okay, so we're going to do that. I'll hit the OK button, and now we've got patch 13 has been selected on my piano module. Now let's say I want to actually save that into the sequence so that when I load up the sequence, it automatically jumps to patch 13. I can do that. I basically have what are called marks. So there's a button here called Mark Patch where I can be on any step in the sequence. And if I hit the, let's see, it's yellow. So I hit the yellow, Mark Patch. I'm at step 1 at the very beginning of the sequence. So if I do Mark Patch, now basically what that has done is it's recorded in the sequence that at that step to send that patch message. You can actually use that to change patches mid-sequence. You can use that to change patches per bank. So maybe when you switch over from one bank to another, the first thing it does is it sends patch change messages. If you want to remove the patch change message, you can do a shift yellow clear patch, and that's going to clear all the patch change messages within that track in that bank. Because each track has its own patch messages to the different devices. While we're there with the mark, there's also mark tempo. So you can basically have your tempo set. So here actually, if I, again, want it to always default to this tempo, it'll actually save the tempo. So that you don't really need to do. But if you want to change tempo mid-song or mid-sequence, you can use a mark tempo, and that basically records that tempo. And then you can go at a different point, go to a different tempo, mark that, and it'll switch back and forth between the two. You can also, again, there's a clear tempo. So if you just want to clear that, tempos are actually bank wide. So if I do a clear tempo, it doesn't matter what track I did it on. It's just going to clear the tempo. I can also record CC messages and record pitch wheel messages and mod wheel messages. And so there's a clear CC and clear pitch, which would clear any messages for that particular track. So we've got this 2-bar pattern, and what I want to do is I want to actually make it a longer pattern. So what I'm going to do is, if I do a shift bar, which is this green button, it's showing me 2 bars. I can go ahead and make that an 8-bar pattern. So let's play that. Let's see what happens. Nothing. Okay, and the reason nothing's happening is because I haven't filled those 8 bars yet. I only have 2 bars. So a quick way to kind of fill the bars is I'm going to go back to 2 bar, and I'm going to go, let's do it by track first. So if I go to, there's a fill track, which is a white button, shift white, fill track. If I do that and I'm on the piano track and I hit that, what that's going to do is it's going to take whatever current length I'm on, in this case 2 bars, and it's going to duplicate those bars to fill the entire track. So now if I switch to, say, 8 bars, okay, but you see, I only did the piano track, so that filled the whole thing, but the drums and stuff didn't. So there is also a fill drums. So if I do that, it doesn't matter what track I'm on when I do a fill drums. Oops, so I do need to be at 2 bars though, because I only have 2 bars of drums. So I'm going to do that. And now that's taken the drum tracks and duplicated those to fill the entire bank with that drum pattern. So now okay, so now I've filled up the entire bank with that pattern. There's also a fill bank, and that basically just takes everything from those initial 2 bars and fills that. And it doesn't have to be only 2 bars. If I was here at 4 bars and I did a fill track, fill drums, or fill bank, it would basically take those 4 bars and duplicate them 4 times to fill the blank. And then same thing if I did 8, or even if I did 6, it would do 6 and try to fill the whole thing. So now I can do an 8-bar pattern. Say, let's say at the 16 bar point, I want to, actually let's do it here. So let's do an 8-bar pattern, and then at the 5th bar, I'm going to add some strings. Okay, so let's hit record. Okay, one thing I'm going to do is, if you've noticed when I've been playing, this red line of LEDs has basically been highlighting what track, when a track plays a note. So it basically lights up on a drum hit or when a note starts. There is actually a setting that allows you to change that. So to get into settings, you do shift and push the knob in. And you can't really see it with my video, but that basically says settings, and then you turn the knob to go through different buckets of settings. This one is preferences. I'm going to click down on that. Group MIDI, group drum MIDI. That was what I talked about earlier, where you can choose if you want to, when you change a MIDI channel, does it change them all for all the drums to that MIDI channel or just that one? Red LED display, that's what I'm going to change. So I'm going to click on that, and I can basically check. It says red LED display tracks, and I can basically change that to tracks. I can change it to both, or I can have them just red LEDs aren't used at any time for that, which actually is not that useful. And then steps, and actually steps is what I want, because I'm going to select steps. Now this red line, instead of showing me what notes are playing, it actually shows me the step that I'm on. And I'll show you why that is handy right now. So we're going to do this. We're going to go back to the piano line. And we're going to, with the green button, these two red and green buttons, without the shift button, they allow you to jump around. So if I press the green button, it says jump to bar, and now I can jump to bar 5 of 8. And if I play there, now it's going to jump there. Whenever I hit stop, it'll go back, but if I hit play, it'll stay where it is. So play is kind of a pause, continue kind of action. But the reason I do this is because, again, if you press the step button, the red button, that allows you to jump to step. And so now I'm on step, step 8, bar 1. The reason I'm going to do that is because what I'm going to do for the piano part here is I'm going to jump to bar 5. Actually, let's do this. Let's jump to bar 4, step 15. So this is a 8th note before we jump into bar 5. And what I'm going to do is I have these functions here, octave and semi, which allow you to basically shift a track up and down an octave or up and down a semitone. The top line without the shift is basically, let's do the bottom one with the shift is going to basically do the whole pattern, all 16 bars. But the top one basically, again, you probably can't see it, but there's a funky little arrow with a bracket kind of thing. And what that basically says is it does the transformation from the current step you're at to the end of the sequence for that bank. So let's do this. We're going to go, we are almost at the end of the 4th bar and on the piano, and I'm going to raise that up a semitone. So we're going to do, it's white and semi plus. Okay, so now everything from that point on after bar 5 has been raised a semitone on the piano track. Now what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go to now I'm going to go to bar 5, and we're going to do that again, but this time we're going to do another semitone up. Okay, so now what this has done is it's basically created this little stepping thing. So let's see if that sounds good. I don't know if it will. And it sounds like crap because my strings are now in the wrong note. So let's do this. Let's go to the strings, and here I'm just going to do the whole thing. So I'm on the strings. That is a shift white semitone up 2. So 1, 2. So that's going up a whole note. So let's see if that sounds any better. Again, I'm just playing around here. Okay, so that was dumb, but you get the idea. Again, can do the same thing with an octave. All right, so yeah, that was a complete train wreck. What I'm going to do to fix that is, one, I'm going to clear the string bank because why not? So again, clear track is shift yellow, clear track, yes, clear the track, yes. Okay, so now the strings are gone. It should point out on clear, there's clear track, there's clear drums, which will clear all the drums within a pattern, but not the MIDI notes. There's clear bank, which will clear the entire bank, and then there's clear all, which will clear all 4 banks, and it's basically starting from fresh and emptying all the events out. Okay, so that was a complete failure. Let's see. So I just deleted the strings, but let's go to the piano part. Still kind of like that. Now the thing with the piano part, it was, remember, it was a 2-bar phrase. So what I can do is I can actually go back to a 2-bar phrase, and then I can go to fill track, which is the shift white fill track. And now it's like that never happened. So okay, so that's one way to fix your mistakes. There is actually a restore kind of undo functionality. It's a little buggy at the moment, but basically what I do is every time I press the stop button, I keep a backup a file of the state at that point, and then when you do a yellow restore, you can basically go back in time to different backups. Again, it's a little buggy with the whole numbers and stuff. I need to figure out a better way to do that. The other thing I should point out, shift knob is basically a cancel. Anytime you do a shift knob, you'll basically be backing out or canceling something. So we did not actually do a restore at that point because I did a shift knob. All right, so what I want to do is I want to now move on to a different bank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piano part and copy it to the next bank. So if I do a, let's see, we've got copy track here. That's shift white copy track. So shift white copy track. Now basically what this says is copy bank track. So if I was to press a track button right now, it would basically be I'm on track one, bank 1, and it would copy it to another track within bank 1. I actually want to copy it to bank 2. So I'm going to hit 2, and then I want to put it back in 5, same track though. Okay, so now if I go to bank 2, okay, so I just have the only thing I copied into bank 2 was the piano. And so I'm going to add just a 4 on the floor. Bass line there. Let's do this. Let's do a Arpeggiator on there. So we're in the C minor. So let's do that. Let's fill the track. So let's shift white, fill track. So now the bass line is the full thing, and we'll make it 8 bars. And we're gonna record a melody on this. So okay, now you notice my drums stop. That's because when I put the drums, I only did a 2-bar pattern, and I didn't fill it. So let's do this. Let's do fill drums. I could also go over to the drum track and fill track, but let's just do fill drums. Okay, so now my drums follow through, and now we're just going to do a little melody thing. Let's probably be stupid, but let's see. Yeah, let's do this. If you do a shift play, it'll do a 2-bar counting. Rumble Okay, perfect time to do this. Solo and mute. So I'm going to actually, these two buttons here are solo and mute. Green is solo. I'm going to solo the kick. Okay. I'm going to solo the... Okay, so you can solo or mute any of these. The bank buttons have functions in the solo and mute also. On the solo side, I can just solo the instruments. I can clear all solos, solo just the drums, clear all solos, solo everything, clear all solos. Same thing on the mute. I can mute just the instruments, clear all mutes, mute just the drums, clear all mutes, mute everything. Okay, and then also on the solo mutes there are locks. So if you do a shift solo, it basically locks the solos. So I don't need to hold down the solo button. I do need to hold them down if I want to do the bank buttons. But I don't need to hold it down. So this is if you're playing back a track. Sometimes it's just nice just to lock it in there as you're bringing parts in and out. And then if I hit shift solo again, it gets me out of the lock. Okay, so let's do this then. So actually what I'm going to do, just to create a little song here, is I'm going to be in the bank. Each bank has its own solo and mute state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just solo the kick. Okay, now we're going to, if I'm not playing and I switch the bank buttons, it just automatically switches. Once I do play, it's going to cue unless I do a shift and then a bank, and then it'll do it immediately. So let me show you that. So there I did a shift bank and it changed immediately. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit bank 2, and now you see it's flashing, which means it's queued. Okay, so now it switched over to bank 2, but in bank 2, the only thing is soloed is the kick. That's why this is flashing, to show that something's soloed. So now I can bring in the... Okay, so now it's going to play the melody, and then it'll go back to 1. Okay, so we've got the mutes and solos, we did the bank length, we did the step edit, we did the pattern length, we did banks, we've done, let's see, yellow. Oh, on the yellow, we've got new, which will create just a new project. We've got save, which allows you to save your project to the SD card. If you do shift yellow, it's save as new, which will basically create a copy. Also in the file system, you can take the SD card out, put it in your computer, and rename files. Otherwise, by default, it does project and then some number, and it basically figures out what the next available number is. But you can rename your files if you want to save them. The other thing you can do is you can start your file name with an underscore, and that basically makes it kind of a read-only thing. When it loads in the project, it automatically creates it as a new file with a new name. So it's kind of like a template, I guess. So it allows you to load in a file, and then you can just mess with it. And if you like what you messed with, you can save it as something new, but you don't end up messing up the original. Also in the yellow line, there's load, which allows you to select a file to load. There's reload. So basically, the idea here is you load a project, you tweak it, blah, 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 and then you want to go back to its initial state. If you hit reload, it will reload that last project. Restore, I already kind of talked about that. That's kind of like heading towards an undo feature. It's kind of buggy right now. Mark patch, clear patch we did. We'd clear CC, clear pitch we did. I guess one thing I should mention there on the clear CC, there is a global setting that indicates whether you actually want to record CC messages or not. So again, if I do shift button down, let's see, it's under recording. So this says recording. Metronome, that's going to tell you, allows you to set whether the metronome is on during recording or not. Record pitch wheel. So if I want, right now it's set to low, which on the pitch wheel in the MIDI specification has it's 128 times 128, whatever that is, resolution in a high resolution mode, but some older equipment don't support that. They only support 128 value resolution, and actually you might want the lower resolution if, again, memory is stored as events, and so if you have too high of a resolution, you're going to be storing a lot of data. So if you're doing a lot of pitch bending, you may end up filling up your memory. So you can basically not record the pitch wheel. You can record it at a low resolution or at a high resolution. Let's see, well, we're also in there, same thing, CC messages, you can record them or not. So mod wheel is a CC message, but also any other CC message that your controller sends out will get recorded. So you can turn that on and off. And then if it doesn't get recorded and you don't like it, you can always clear it at the per track level. Continuing down the yellow line, clear track basically deletes everything in a track at the bank level. Clear drums basically clear track clears the track. Clear drums clears all the drum tracks. Clear bank clears the entire bank. Clear all clears everything from every bank. Those last ones, so we talked about drum maps and setting the default drum maps. On the shift 13, there's what's called erase. Erase basically allows you to erase mid sequence for a track. So let's do that. Let's go to, I got to cancel out of this record CC. Going to cancel out of the settings. Okay, so we're going to go to bank 2. And I've got this melody. Okay, so let's say I want to get rid of that second phrase. So what I'm going to do is it's on track 1, and it's basically shift 13. That's the erase. So I'm going to get ready with shift 13. I'm going to play. And then I hold down the shift erase. Okay, so now I just erased that little segment when I was holding down the erase button. So that's another way to edit your track. One thing I don't have implemented right now, but it's on the short list of things to do, is right now record is only overlay. So as you loop through, you're constantly overlaying new things. I want to make a record mode that is either overlay or replace. Haven't done that yet, but I will be doing that. Did we do all the white? We did copy track. There's also copy drums and copy bank, which would allow you to copy a full bank to another bank. We did the octave, transpose, the semitones, nudging, flip. So flip, the idea of flip is if you have a track, let's see if we can make it work. Okay, so now on the white flip, I haven't quite finished flip. I have some different ideas there, but the idea is basically it flips a track. It flips all 16 bars. So if you only have a 8-bar state, it actually doesn't work too well, because if this is empty like it is for the melody track, you're going to have empty and then you're going to have the melody over there flipped. But then if you're only playing 8 bars, you're never going to get to it. So let's not do the melody, let's do the piano. We'll flip it. And now let's see what happens. So, okay, this is the piano flipped. Not as interesting. So actually, let's do this. Let's flip it back. All right, nudge. So nudge basically nudges a track 16th note to the left or 16th note to the right. You can either nudge at a particular point, or you can nudge the whole track. So actually, let's make this kind of interesting. We're going to take the piano. We're back to the original, but I'm going to jump over to bar 5, so halfway through the piano, and let's nudge from that point to the right. So now the piano rhythm is going to be off. And actually, let's, for fun, nudge it again. So it'll be off an 8th note. Okay, so we're going to hit stop, brings us back to the beginning, play. Okay. So it's just a way of kind of varying the rhythm. So yeah, nudge left, nudge right, nudge all left, nudge all right. So we've done the full white line. We did all the robot stuff. Oh, I did not do the robot pattern thing. Let's do this. I'm going to turn the Turing machine back on. We're going to be doing 16th notes. We're going to be doing random weighted. We want to do a C minor thing, although it's a little funky. But we'll do C minor. We're going to do staccato. We're going to do it within an octave. Our pattern length is 4. Probability, we want to set to 100 right now. Complexity is 60. That's good. Scale, we're going to do a minor pentatonic. That's good. Okay, so, and latch is on. So now if I do this. Okay, so we have the Turing machine. Okay, and it's basically creating a random pattern, filling this in. So I'm going to record this. Okay, so now we basically have kind of this random thing, which will serve its purpose. So let's do this. Let's turn off the Turing machine. All right, so we got this 16-bar pattern in here now with this random melody layered over the top. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the random pattern player. What this does is it randomly picks a pattern based on the length. So we've selected 2 bars, so it's going to randomly pick one of the sets of 2 bars to play. Now it doesn't have to actually be random. It actually goes off of the arpeggiator direction setting. So right now it's on random weighted, which basically means it would pick the first 2 bars more often than any of the other bars. That's the weighted part. If we just did random, it would pick any 2 bars. So let's try that. So now you can see it's jumping around and kind of mixing things up a bit. So this is kind of fun. I do this sometimes at the end of a track where I have a melody that's playing through the whole thing, but as we're doing the outro of the track, I'll just randomize segments of the melody. The other thing we could do is we can do, let's do just down. So now it's going to play the 2 bars down, counting down. So it still gives you a sense of the melody, but it's a mix-up of the melody in an interesting way. Okay, let's go ahead and turn that. And that actually applies to all tracks. It doesn't apply to a single track like the other robots do. So it's really just track independent. It's more about the pattern. But we're going to turn that off. Okay, we've got a couple of performance things here. One is if we just do a shift 1, that's going to turn the metronome on and off during recording. So if you don't want it on, you can turn it off that way. Restart basically restarts a pattern. So if we go back to our 8 bars, ratchet basically will ratchet the step you're on. Right now it just does 16th note ratchets. MIDI panic basically sends a note off to all MIDI devices. This line here that says knob, it's basically a shortcut into the settings. So before I showed you how to do a shift knob to get into the settings menu to turn the record, pitch bend, and all that stuff. Some of these things have a shortcut where you can just hold the knob button and it'll show you the current status of the settings. So here's like that group MIDI thing, which was the group drum MIDI, which was basically do when you change a MIDI channel on a drum track, does it change it for all drum tracks? So that's currently on. I could turn that off real quick this way. So these are basically like shortcuts to settings. So swing falls into that category. Right now swing is off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn swing on. And there are 2 types of swing. There's an 8th note swing and a 16th note swing. And then there's actually the swing value. So if we go into hit the shift swing value, can't see it on the display probably, but it says swing value 50%. So there's different swing values, back to 50%. Sounded like there might have been a note stuck on there. Okay. So there's swing, and then that was 8th note swing. If I want to do 16th note swing, I can switch to 16th note. Oops. So that's swing. Okay, so last thing, step record. So if I do shift record, that puts me into step record mode. It says step record right there. So now every 16th note I play, every note I play on the keyboard will get recorded as a 16th note by default. So let's do a few of those. So we'll do that. Okay, hit record, get out. Okay, I'm going to change the pattern like the 2 just so we hear it more. So that is just what we recorded. Okay, so the other thing you can do though is you can, let's do this. So that's Okay, so that's all filling up bar 1. Let's jump to bar 2. We're going to go into step edit. I'm sorry, step record. And now these two buttons actually have function. One is a tie. So if I do a note and then I hit yellow, it's going to tie those notes. Okay. And now the other button does a rest. So let's see, we were doing C, F. So let's do F. And rest. Okay. So let's see how that turned out. That is step record. You can also do the same thing on the drums. It's not the exact same thing, but it's similar, where you can quickly enter a drum pattern. It's very similar to the step edit. Yeah. Oh, I guess that's one other thing on step edit. I mentioned let's do that track. And we're going to go, I don't know, let's go here. And so I mentioned you can do a shift. When you're on a drum track, you can do basically if you pick a note, it's going to nudge it left, nudge it right. This is going to toggle the note on and off. This is going to toggle the accent. So that's a drum track. So there I just toggled the accent on. Okay, if you were on a note track, so say we're at this kind of 303 bass thing that we got going here. If I pick a note, let's do that one. I can nudge it left, I can nudge it right, or I can toggle the note, delete the note. I can't accent a note because there's no idea. In fact, that should not be flashing right there. Because there's no concept of accenting a thing. Oh, that is a group of things I forgot to mention. Okay, so actually let's do this. Let's cancel out of that. Velocity, recording, and stuff. So the step edit basically recorded whenever I record something, I record the volume, the velocity. So let's go back to this track. Let's go ahead. So that actually, although it's hard to tell, let's do this again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the track. Okay. So nothing on that track, and we're back on. Okay. We're going to go back to the step edit, and the first one was okay, so what I did there is that first note I really hit hard on the keyboard, and then the other ones I didn't. So let's see if that works. So first of all, there was one little flub there. Let's actually see if we can edit that out. No, because it was this note here, I think. So one way to edit out, it would be just to delete it. So okay, because on that step I actually hit two notes at the same time. Which step edit does allow you to record chords. So it basically treats any kind of note down together as a group and up as a chord. Okay, so you can kind of hear the accent in there. I think this patch may not be the best representation of that, but let's see. So one thing I can do here, I'm going to exit step edit. For that track, I am going to go to these white keys here, which are velocity, up and down, up, normalize, and maximize. And so basically what I can do is for the entire track, I can hit the velocity down, and that's going to bring the velocity down. you notice it's quieter. Okay, I need to bring it up. Okay, so what that is basically doing is shifting the whole velocity levels up. I think it's like 10 values down and up, but they maintain their relationship to each other. If I do a normalize velocity, that's going to take the loudest one and make that 127, and then everything will be relative to that. So that just makes the track as loud as it can be while still maintaining the dynamics within the track. Okay. And then if I do maximize velocity, then that's going to basically make everything 127. Okay. And then, so what I can do is if I want to have a constant level, I can maximize it, bring it all to 127, and then I can bring it down to the correct level. But then all the notes are the same. So that allows you to manage the velocity for your melodic notes. Okay, so I think that's it. Let's see, if we go to Shift, Settings, Preferences, we talked about drum group, we talked about LED display, talked about confirm delete, load last project. So this is basically an on or off, that when you bring the power up, will it restore its last state? That's actually broken at the moment. MIDI, so you can specify a MIDI input channel. Recording, you can specify whether the metronome comes on when you're doing a recording. You can specify if you want to record pitch change, pitch wheel values, if you want to record CC messages. Clock, you can specify the clock source. Like I said, it can be internal, it can be a MIDI input, it can be an external 16th note, an external 8th note, or an external 24 pulses per quarter note. And that's current settings. I have some other ideas for some settings I haven't implemented yet. Let's see, I probably want to fix that clock one because it changed. Go back to internal. Okay. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. The plan at the moment is I have a few boards and get those out there and to put the code up. The code has a few bugs I still need to address before I'll do that. But yeah, hopefully somebody out there will build this. Thanks.